Hi everyone! Today we're making amaretti biscuits. So officially we're in December and it's getting more and more Christmassy by the day, and it just seems like a perfect time to make these almond biscuits. So prior to my vegan days, which is quite a few years ago, every December approaching Christmas, it was a tradition of mine to pop into an Italian deli and buy a big bag of amaretti biscuits. Amaretti biscuits, of course, you can enjoy them any time of the year, but for me, it's definitive a Christmas treat. For some reason, panettone and amaretti biscuits, they define Christmas for me, probably more so than Christmas pudding. And since I went vegan, I've been creating my own homemade amaretti biscuits. And now I'm on keto, it makes perfect sense to create a keto vegan version. So today I'm going to show you how to make these delicious, citrusy, almondy Italian biscuits. They're going to make your taste buds so happy. And before we do that, I just want to quickly let you know I now have an Amazon shopfront set up. So there's a UK version and a US version, and they feature basically the product and equipment that I use in the kitchen that you've been asking about a lot with my recipes. So the great thing about the shop is that instead of individual links, there's only one single link that you need to go to, and you get to see all the products there. And this is really useful if you ever wonder about what products I use or the tools I use. It's an affiliation with Amazon, so there's a commission that goes into it. So I just want to make it very clear to you. So obviously if you buy through my shop, it supports the channel, but you don't have to. You can compare the prices and buy them wherever you want. But I think the great thing about the shop is the fact that you can look up product details and then you know exactly what they are. So it will probably help you to source ingredients or to buy the tools you need. And also not every country has Amazon available to them. So those countries that don't, I would still suggest that you look them up if you ever wonder about the ingredients, etc. At least you can identify the products, and then you can look up your local shops and see if they're available to you, or maybe find something similar. Okay, so that's out of the way. Let's make the biscuits. So the ingredients you need. So these are almond biscuits. So naturally, I'm going to use ground almonds. But this recipe works with any kind of almond flour, from really coarse ones like this to really fine, extra fine. And you can also use coconut flour if you so prefer. So it depends on the flour you use, it creates different texture biscuits, but they're all delicious in different ways. So the finer the flour you use, the lighter the texture is. So I prefer a slightly more crumbly and chewy amaretti, so I'm using ground almonds. And then to bind the biscuits, we're going to use some flaxseed, ground flaxseed. So what I've got here is golden flaxseed, ground flaxseed. And the color is a lot lighter, as you can see. And I would recommend that you use the golden variety because you end up with golden color biscuits. So with the regular ground flaxseed, the darker ones, it will still work perfectly, but you will end up with slightly darker biscuits. And then we need some coconut oil and some baking powder. And then we need some sweetener. So I'm using Truvia, which is erythritol, essentially. It's kind of in a granulated form. And it works quite well for most of my recipes, and I like the taste. And then I've got another sweetener, which is also erythritol, and but in powder form. So you can see how fine this powder is. It's like icing sugar. So I'm going to use it to coat my biscuits. And then I've got some nuts here as well. I've got some almonds here. So again, this is amaretti, so I'm going almonds all the way. But to be honest, you can use other nuts as well. I have used Brazil nuts that work quite well as well. So it's up to you. If for any reason you want to use other nuts, you could. But I think almonds probably works best. And you want to make sure that you get the unroasted, unflavored ones. So these are plain almonds. So traditionally, amaretti is very often made with amaretto, the liqueur. But if you ever tasted amaretto, you will know how sweet it is. It's literally syrup and it's full of sugar. So obviously, it's not going to work for us. So instead, we're using almond extract. And make sure it's almond extract and not almond essence. And just like vanilla extract, which we're going to use as well, make sure they're extract. So essence is essentially artificial flavoring and you really don't want to put that in your food, and they taste synthetic as well. But the last but not the least, we need one orange. So this is a kind of medium-sized orange, and I can probably hear some of you screaming and go, that's got carbs in it. And indeed, it's got some sweetness to it, there's some carbs. But we only need about 3 tablespoons of the orange juice. It's okay to have an orange, okay? It's Christmas. And, and those are, more importantly, we're going to get a zest of the skin as well. So make sure you clean it properly, and it's going to provide wonderful, wonderful flavors for your amaretti biscuits. And this is it. This is all you need. So the first thing we're going to do is to prepare our flaxseed, our ground flaxseed. So I've got 3 tablespoons of ground golden flaxseed. And we're going to create something called flaxseed eggs. So essentially, the flaxseed is performing the same function as what eggs would do in a kind of non-vegan situation. So what I've got here is some hot water, piping hot, freshly from the kettle. And we need about half a cup of hot liquid in this. I'm gonna just pour it in. And just whisk it with a fork or a mini whisk like this. And you want to make sure it's blended together. And we're gonna leave it on the side for, I say, about 15 minutes. And while we're waiting for the flaxseed egg to be ready, we're going to get the zest out of this orange. So I've got a grater here, and I'm going to just gently grate the skin of the orange. So you don't want to go too deep. You don't want the white bits. All you want is this beautiful orange layer. It smells so good as you do it. It feels Christmassy for me, orange. The skin is beautiful. Okay, so that's kind of done. I've taken the zest out, pretty much. And then I'm going to just scrape this out. So there's a fair bit of the zest here, and it's going to be just lovely. And now I'm going to cut the orange in half, like this, so I can get the juice out of it. So here's my juicer, and I'm going to just quickly squeeze it. So you want to squeeze it quite clean. What we want is the juice, and we also want the pulp as well. So we want to remove the pips, but make sure you get the pulp of the orange in as well. So there's no pips inside. This orange is kind of pipless, so that's great. I'm gonna just add the pulp back into the juice. Great, so that's my orange juice ready there. And then we're gonna chop up our nuts. I want the nuts quite chunky, so I'm going to just roughly chop them up. Okay, that's it. So I leave them really, really chunky, and some of them almost whole still. It's gonna give the biscuit a great texture. And now let's prepare the flour. So what I've got here is 150 grams of ground almonds. You can use finer ones. If you're using coconut flour, use 60 grams. The recipe is down in the description as usual, so you can look it up. And in the almond flour, we're going to add in 1.5 teaspoon of baking powder. And we're going to give it a quick mix, just to blend everything together. And let me just pop it aside for a moment. And here's our flaxseed mixture. So it's been resting for about 15 minutes. You can see it is so thick and gooey, and this is the texture you want. And then in the flaxseed, we're going to add in our coconut oil. So I've got about 60 grams here. It's one of the rare occasions that I actually don't melt the coconut oil. But in some places, if you're in somewhere warm, your coconut oil is probably always in liquid form. And now we're going to just mix it together. It doesn't have to be super smooth. We just want to mix in the oil here. Okay, that's good enough for me. There's still small lumps, it doesn't matter. And now I'm going to bring back the flour. And in the flour, I'm going to add in a pinch of salt. So this is kind of important step. So I always add a bit of salt in sweet things. It just accentuates the sweetness. And then we're going to add in this gooey mixture. Just pour the whole thing in there. And then I'm going to add in my sweetener as well. So if you're using the same product as I do, I think risotto in general is probably very similar. So for my taste buds, I need about 2.5 tablespoons of the sweetener. So that's a sweetener that goes in. And then I'm going to add in half a teaspoon of the almond extract. And it's so aromatic. I love the smell. It's quite potent. Very little goes a long way. And then a dash of vanilla extract, just a quick dash. And now we're going to mix the whole thing together. If you have a mixer, you can use a mixer to do all this. It's super quick. if you use a mixer. But it's hardly hardship, even if you do it by hands. It's so quick and easy. So at this point, because we haven't added our orange juice, it will appear to be kind of dry, and this is perfectly fine. It's the way it should be. And now we're going to add in our beautiful orange juice. So this is a liquid you want to use to adjust the consistency of your dough, and we're looking for kind of thick batter kind of consistency. I'm going to add in probably 2 tablespoons to start with. So normally I need about 3 tablespoons. So if you're using finer flour, like almond flour or coconut flour, you might need a little bit more. So I'm going to add in another probably half a tablespoon or so. So give it a good mix. Spend a couple minutes, just mix it together. The mixture, the dough just smells so good. So I'm gonna just have a quick look. You should be able to pick up the mixture and then quickly roll in your hand without sticking too much. So it's very, very sticky, but it's not sticking to my hands. So this is perfect. So the dough or the batter, whatever you want to call it, is in perfect consistency. And now we're going to add in our orange zest. It's just going to be so beautiful. I think the orange is really the soul of the biscuits. So that's our zest in there. And then we're going to pop in our nuts as well. I think I'm going to add in a whole lot. So this is about 80 grams of chopped almonds. And I'm going to mix the whole thing together. I think I'm going to use my hand, it's easier. I like to fill my food. So just give it a quick mix. You can see the orange zest that comes through, and it smells wondrous. It smells so good. Nice and gooey, and it's going to make great biscuits. Okay, lovely. I think that's ready. So mix together. And now let's create the biscuits. So what I've got here is my baking tray, lined with a layer of baking sheet, and there's no need to grease. The biscuits won't stick. And here's my beautiful biscuit mixture. And all you do, you can dab a little bit of water in your hands if you want to, but it really shouldn't stick too much. So what I'm going to do is just take a little portion out of it and then roll in my hands. So you can see they're sticky, but they're not so sticky that you can't handle it. And the size is up to you. This is kind of perfect for me. You don't want to make them too big. I mean, the charm of amarettis, they're these kind of almost bite-sized biscuits. So that's my first biscuit. I'm going to just place it there. And then I'm going to grab another one. It's so satisfying to make. So traditionally at this point, you'll roll them in sugar. But we're not going to do that because the sweetener doesn't behave the same way as sugar. It's not going to caramelize. Instead, it's going to burn. So we don't want that. So we're going to coat a layer of sweetener later. We're going to just bake it as it is. Okay, the last one. So they're ready to go into the oven, and look at them. They've got these nuts peeking out of the biscuits, and they're going to be so lovely and crunchy. So let's bake them. And now the biscuits are ready to go into a 170-degree preheated oven for about 25 minutes. So the key with baking these biscuits is bake them just about golden brown, but not beyond. So you don't want to bake them till the surfaces are crusty. They're supposed to be still slightly soft to touch when they're baked. But once they're cool, they'll form this beautiful crust on the surface, and the center is fluffy, crumbly, and slightly chewy. It's beautiful to eat. So there you go, freshly out of the oven. So I baked them for about 25 minutes, and they're beautiful and golden brown. And they're still quite soft to touch, and that's the way it should be. And now we're going to transfer them onto a baking rack. So I've got a baking tray underneath, and I'm going to put my rack on top, and then transfer all the biscuits on top. And this will allow them to cool properly. So now comes the most challenging part of the recipe. We're going to leave the biscuit to cool for about an hour. I know the smell is so inviting, but the biscuits simply need time to cool, so you get that beautiful crusty surface. But in the meantime, you get to enjoy this beautiful aroma. Okay, so the biscuits now, they're almost back to room temperature. There's still slight warmth to them, and what we're going to do is to coat them with the powder sweetener. So the cooling is not quite done yet, but we're going to just coat them with the sweetener and then put them back on the rack so they can continue to cool. So you kind of want to do this when the biscuits are still a little bit warm. So just coat it generously with the powdered sugar or sweetener. They'll turn into these beautiful snowballs. So London's going to snow apparently tomorrow. It will probably just be 5 flakes. That's what normally happens. We haven't got proper snow for many years, I think. But there's always kind of a few flakes here and there, spice things up a little bit. Okay, and I'm going to leave them to continue to cool. So there you go. Here's our keto vegan amaretti. They look so good. I've let them to cool for about an hour and now it's perfect time to eat. So let me pick one of my victims. So normally I'll leave them to cool for a bit longer, sometimes a few hours, but I can't wait. And they're actually even better the following day. Look at this little dome of pleasure. I'm going to break it up for you to show you what it's like. So the surface is actually slightly crusty already. There you go. So it's kind of slightly crumbly, and when you bite into it, it's slightly chewy. It's beautiful. So, it's so good. A lot of nuts, just the way I like it. Look at this. And the orange really comes through, and it works so well with the almond flavor. It's just so nice. It feels like Christmas already. So in terms of storage, if you keep them in an airtight cookie jar, they should keep well for up to a week, no problem. I haven't kept them longer than that. They might still be okay, but I say, you know, make the quantity that you can finish within a few days. You just get the best flavors. So the recipe is really good base for all sorts of biscuits. So you can add chocolate chips maybe, and or spices like cinnamon will work really, really well. And also amaretti very often is made with amaretto, right, with alcohol. So if you want a slightly grown up version, you can add a few dashes of whiskey, rum or brandy. So liqueurs like brandy, whiskey and vodka, they're quite keto friendly because there's very little sugar. So you can judge it up with a bit of liqueur and it feels wonderfully Christmassy already. So I hope you liked today's recipe and will give it a go. I mean, these amaretti biscuits will really put a smile on your face. So follow me on Instagram if you haven't already. I post the food I eat and recipes from this channel. So thank you for hanging out with me today and thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.